Yeah, I got through the first level.
Yay!
That was my question. You did?
Woo!
I did.
You have grown as a gamer. Welcome to New Game Plus. This is a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name is Dustin.
My name is Kenny.
Nolan.
And this is episode 364.
Welcome to the New Game Plus podcast. How do I need to do that again?
I hope I don't laugh through half of this. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, we need to talk about what in the world is going on here because this episode is titled Earthworm Jim, but we've already done that before.
Yes, this is what is Redux? Redo? What word is that?
I mean, yes, I think it's very close to redo. I think we like it particularly because of the definition, which is brought back or revived. I mean,
We are reviving.
Okay.
yeah, this is some
Perfect.
revitalization happening here because we are going back to the very first episode that we recorded in September of 2015. Some of you weren't even born yet.
I mean,
that might be true.
that is.
We got one or two young listeners.
Yeah, like
Wait.
someone that's been on the show. Maybe.
I guess it. Hold on. Whoa.
I know.
I was
don't think about
joking,
it.
but
Don't
I
think
guess
about
that it could be true. I mean,
Um,
they're not listening on their own, but with their parent. I mean, I know a lot in our community have had children since then.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. And they probably listen because they're committed. Why are we doing this? Well, I mean, it sucked. It's 20 is how many years ago? 8, 7.
I mean,
And
7 something, right?
It's just like you go back and listen to it, and it's not a good representation. So if someone's looking for a podcast and they look up New Game Plus, they like the new episode, I'm going to go back to the beginning and start over. They're gone. A lot of you did stick around, to be fair.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
Somehow.
we think we can do better, so we're reduxing it.
I'm not convinced.
You're not committed to doing better.
No, I'm just not convinced that we will.
Well, we already are a little bit, right? Because in the first episode, we started it by just laughing at ourselves.
And we've communicated a ton so far. The
Oh.
first episode, we communicated nothing in the first 5.
I don't think we communicated anything in the entirety of the episode.
I know. We were noobs.
So
We
I
just
mean, it's
talked.
fine. You got to start somewhere.
what's fun in this episode, as we're reduxing it, is that we are going to be taking a listen down memory lane every once in a while. We'll be including a few clips from that time so many years ago.
I didn't know we were doing this
I
part.
don't like it. You know I'm anti-listening to myself after
Right,
the fact.
right.
And
Wait,
so I'm uncomfortable with this whole premise
Yes,
on
Nolan.
principle.
This is
will
the
be the
first,
first time.
Kenny will have listened to our podcast because you're forcing him.
That's not true. There
Holy-
have been other times I've listened to it. Most of them have been forced, however.
Oh my gosh.
Kenny, you can do better than that. 7 years in, you're gonna start listening to our podcast from here on out.
No, he's not. Don't be that hopeful. Come on now.
Come on, use your head. Like in our retro game of the week, Earthworm Jim. Again.
Transitions are one thing that has not gotten better.
Overview.
Well, our first game was not randomly selected. We kind of just talked it out, and the first game that we played was Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim.
It's a great idea.
It is a beautiful idea. For those of you that don't know, Earthworm Jim is a game that came out in 1994 for Sega Genesis, and since then it's come on different consoles, and as well as I think there's a PC version as well. And it's just a run and gun platformer where you are an earthworm in a robotic suit who battles the forces of evil. Is that about right?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't tell you the premise. I didn't read anything about it. I just played it, and I don't know.
I mean, you got it right for the most part. That's what this game is. There's not a lot to it. It's an earthworm in a magical robotic super suit, platforming and shooting.
Dustin sounded nervous.
At least I sounded like I wanted to be there. Nolan, I'm pretty
still
confident
don't.
that for the first... No, you finally got it together at some point. But for the first little bit, it was a me and Kenny thing while Nolan was just like, yeah, and I'm here too.
Fine.
I was like, it wasn't wasting my time. It was just taking up my time when I
You were like a 12-year-old and you didn't care.
He wanted to be playing League of Legends is what he wanted to do.
I was not playing League of Legends in 2015, Kenny.
Hold on. Were you really married already at this point?
Yes.
Your marriage predates the show?
Yes.
Man, you've been married for a long time.
Yes.
Going strong.
Like Earthworm Jim?
Like Earthworm Jim. Yeah, no. You nailed it on the summary, but you're right. We didn't know what we were doing yet. But we still don't. And so that's wonderful.
Hey, I said last week that I would tell you how we came up with this game, but I didn't know that Dustin said it in the episode. I mean, we didn't randomize it.
No.
We were talking about the concept of the show, and we were like, oh yeah, what would the first game be? You know how? Literally the first game that came in my mind. I don't know what that says about me or my history with the game, but I was just like, Earthworm Jim is retro.
Well, and it's a game that I had rented. I don't think I owned it. Maybe I owned it. Either
I
owned or
rented it too.
rented growing up, and so I knew it was a retro experience that I didn't have much memory of, so it was good to revisit.
Sure. It was a
I
fun
will
one.
say I'm very glad that we've changed our MO
Yeah.
and that we let randomization mostly make those choices for us now. The obvious exceptions with director episodes and what have you are fine and welcome, but I love the chaos of kind of what the show has become without us making those choices.
I did it last time, Kenny. It's your turn to do it this time, and of course you need prompting here 7 years in. Rehash the details of this game.
Oh, I mean, I wasn't going to because you already said it
Hey,
in the
Kenny,
summary, but let
rehash
me give
the
it to you.
details of this
1994,
game.
Shiny entertainment, you're an earthworm, and you're running around platforming.
You're a Jim.
Super Nintendo, but don't actually play it on that because the Genesis version... I'm sorry, Genesis first, and then also Super Nintendo and a couple other things. Play it on the Genesis.
Whoa. I disagree. But also, see, why do people say that? I watched videos this week.
Because it looks like a Genesis
and
game.
everybody
Do you
thinks...
not have ears?
Whoa. And everybody thinks that it came out on the Genesis exclusively, and it did not. It released both. It released both on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis at the same time. I'm a Super Nintendo boy. That's what I played it on, and I'm going to defend it to the death.
You can, but you're wrong. It was designed originally with a thought of being a Genesis exclusive. It didn't end up being and got released on both.
Facts.
And everyone that objectively compares the two will tell you that the Genesis is better unless they're wrong.
I think Kenny won
they
that
are
one,
wrong.
Dustin.
Oh, Kenny doesn't know. Absolutely
I think
not.
he did. He said he had a little history bite there about it was supposed to be exclusive. And it feels Genesis. Come on. It feels like a Genesis game more than
I will give you that it feels Genesis, probably because it was designed first to be on Genesis, but it came out on both of them. So the Super Nintendo is not a port. Anything after the Super Nintendo and the Genesis was a port.
I imagine a lot of people actually played it on the SNES because wasn't that the more popular console at the time?
Yeah.
At least by
A
numbers.
lot of people had the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
So.
So
And it not only got ported back then, but also got some remakes and a couple other things as well down the line. So if you want to play it today, there's like an HD version of the game.
Kenny, you joked about it on your first play, not being your first play, but it's not really even your second or third, because let me remind you, you did, of course, play it for episode 1 of our podcast. You played it during our 24-hour live stream, if you remember, because it was
I do.
It was a community selected game for
painful
you,
watch.
for you to. Oh yeah, very painful. Honestly,
Painful to do as well.
Honestly, it's funny the amount of times that we've had Kenny play this game because
I know.
obviously he's not good at it and he has a special loathing for it, and we've made him first play it so many times.
So
now.
many times. No, I'm bitter about it.
A really high goal on Patreon should just be Kenny live streams
where until he beats it.
Oh my god.
No.
That
do we have a 72-hour live stream?
You know he couldn't. You know that wouldn't.
No, he would
be,
with enough time. I mean,
with save states, yeah, I could certainly grind it out.
He would bash his head against the wall. He would take his head out of his shirt and swing it around.
Nice.
Gameplay.
I know we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of
Nuts?
talking about this game.
Bolts.
And we will.
Game?
But we just gave me a hard time about the first play and how terrible it went, and I need to share a little bit of story with you guys.
Oh, story
Because
time.
there's some context here.
Story time
you
with
guys
Kenny.
watched my story time with Kenny. You guys watched my first play,
too.
presumably. And
Yes.
so you know that I didn't make it through the first level because I got extremely frustrated climbing up that stupid conveyor belt.
When was
I
this? The
don't
first time you played it?
No, this time.
No, this week.
Got
This
it.
time. I don't think that was the place I had gotten stuck in the past, but on our first play, I also didn't get through the game. I don't actually think I got through the whole game, that whole first level the entire week, the first time we played this game, which we got flack for and it was deserved. But I couldn't get up that stupid conveyor belt. Guys, I realized I had an actual hardware issue going on. I went back in and remapped all of my buttons, even though they looked like they were correct. All of my up right, up left, all of my two direction at the same time buttons weren't mapping.
Oh.
I was playing it where I could literally
Up,
only
left,
push
down, right.
up, down, right, and left, and anything that forced you to do two of those at the same time, shooting the birds at an angle, shooting the dog at an angle,
Yeah.
running down those cliffs,
Kenny.
or getting up that conveyor where you had to go sideways and up at the same time, I physically couldn't do.
Okay.
I fixed it. I got so much better at this game.
So user error this whole time? You had to
Whoa.
have felt something
Kenny.
was off.
You're not as bad of a gamer as everyone in the world has thought?
No, I am. I just
Well-
am also so bad I can't set my equipment up correctly, apparently.
Well, no, that's
I don't know what
listen,
happened.
Right, I'm with Nolan.
I don't want to play this game without that. That is
No, it would be it's literally impossible.
Sure,
You
it's
can't
impossible,
climb
sure.
up the thing.
yes.
What's amazing is not that you made a mistake with the hardware, that can happen to anyone, but that you haven't recognized it for who knows how long.
He's just like, oh,
I don't think
this
it
is
happened. I
impossible.
think it's happened every game, and it
So-
certainly would be only Super Nintendo games. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was a new thing that just wasn't working, or I have no idea. But I had to physically go back and reset all of that up, and once I did, I was slightly less bad and was able to progress further in this game.
So on the conveyor belt,
Still bad.
you thought you had to choose
thought-
one path and get lucky that a thing wouldn't fall on you and
No,
just go.
he
That
couldn't
didn't even
jump
work
off in the
'cause
right angle.
You can't jump off. If you jump, you fall. You had to grab the ledge.
Yeah.
So you had to physically be able to
Wow,
get up
Kenny.
and then move to the other side. And so, like, literally, I was hard blocked in the first play. And I got so mad at
shouldn't
this
have shared
game.
that
I thought
That's
it was
worse.
just impossible. And I was like, I'm not even going to be able to play this week, and forget it.
Okay, Kenny.
I did.
Okay, I've got a massive question for you, and we're gonna cheer for you if it is
Yes.
the right answer here. 7
Yeah.
years ago, we discovered on air that you did not beat the first stage. The entire
Yep.
week of playing our very first game, you only played one stage. In fact,
Yep.
it's
Poorly.
in the conversation about Andy's Asteroids, which is a game, a little mini game that is played
Bonus.
after every stage. Nolan and I were talking about it, and Kenny was like, I never played that part. And we're like, how?
Right.
It's all throughout the game. Kenny reveals. Anyway, listen to it now.
I don't know if y'all caught on to it, but I guess that chicken thing that you're racing is named Andy, and he can get so far ahead of you, but the computer does not allow you to get so far ahead of him. And so he's always going to stay on your tail.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a hard minigame, and if you don't beat him in the race, you have to fight him. Did y'all know that?
I didn't know that.
Oh no, I didn't get far enough in the game myself to actually ever play the minigame.
It's after every stage.
You didn't beat the first
I didn't finish the first level.
Okay, well,
I tried a lot of
actually-
times.
I tried a lot of times.
I tried a lot of times.
A lot of times is probably generous. I got frustrated early and tried a few times and gave up. But yeah, got through the first level.
Yeah.
That was my question. You did?
Woo!
I did.
You have grown as a gamer.
Yep. 7
Now,
years
Kenny.
later, and I'm not quite as bad.
Now, I have a follow-up question to that. So you played Andy Asteroids.
Yes.
Did you beat What the Heck?
That's stage
yes.
2.
I got probably about halfway through the game, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
Look at this.
Wow.
Not
It took
easily.
Look at
7
this
years, but we've
gamer
made
god.
progress. He's a gamer.
We had to grind. This game is still tough.
Yeah.
This is called What the Heck.
Here.
It has it's just-
Let me.
And literally, you're in heck.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
so annoying.
We're jumping ahead. For those that are coming to Earthworm Jim for the very first time, it is a semi-traditional platformer where your character's head is your primary means of attack, as well as one of your primary means of transportation. Oh, I guess you also have a little gun, but your head. It's hard to explain, and this is semantics, but your body's head, which is really just your whole body, because Jim is really just an earthworm, and he's
Yeah,
in
he's a
this.
worm.
but he's got arms to remove himself.
No? Oh, well, his
The suit
suit's
has
arms.
arms.
His suit's
Right,
arms.
so the
yes.
suit's alive.
Suit is
Somewhat.
sentient.
He
yeah,
controls
somewhat
it.
But the earthworm is used to whip your enemies, or to grapple these little, grappling hooks, or to helicopter across the stage. And so, like, that is probably the main mechanic, along with the little blaster gun that you're using to platform the stages, fight mini bosses, fight big bosses, beat the game.
You say
Now-
it's your primary attack, and like it's built in as a core feature of the game. You're right. You're not going to ever use it as your primary attack, though, because it's relatively slow.
Talking about the
and a
whip?
bunch of your head whip, and there's a bunch of enemies that if you depend on just whipping them, they're going to get up in your grill, and you can't do anything about it. I would say your gun is your primary attack, but you can certainly fall back to using the whip like that too.
The whip, no doubt, a nod. I don't know if it's a nod or if it's just like a ripoff of Castlevania. Should be your main primary of attack, and I guess it could be, but I never got good enough to rely on it because you're spending ammo with the gun. You have ammo, and you have to collect more ammo, which is like a huge downside of spamming it. So you don't want to spam it, but it's much safer in many cases to eliminate enemies from a distance. But like the whip, it's so precise. It requires such precision, and there is a delay, and the hitbox is kind of really small. That it should be better, and it sucks. I wish the whip was better, and I ended up like getting hit so much because I was like, okay, Castlevania style, jump forward, whip you, you're dead. No, you miss.
And it needs that amount of specificity, not just when you're attacking enemies, but when you're trying to
Grappling.
hit your grapples
of
that
course.
move you around the levels.
Yeah.
And there's a number of places where those aren't like optional bonusy features, but those are the ways you move through the level. So you have to figure out how to do that mechanic, and it's a pretty finicky one.
Whip sucks.
I disagree. I use the whip predominantly because I felt like with every game, I needed to conserve ammo for when I needed it.
He had
I'm
max
someone-
ammo
You're
the
a
whole time.
hoarder.
I'm someone that finishes RPGs with 99 potions and high potions
Yep.
and
He had
stuff
100
because
ammo.
I don't like using it unless I need it, and I never inevitably need it because I don't use it. So it's just
Sometimes you need it to platform. There's this mechanic even in the first stage where like you have to shoot in the opposite direction and slide on a track to get to the other platform. So I don't know what you do if you run out of ammo in that scenario. There's probably a way to get across.
No,
without
I think if you go all the way to 0, that it's a really nice feature that
okay,
it has
still-
an automatic increase to 1,000. I think something like that.
It does.
Okay.
I don't know how high it goes,
Yeah.
but it's an automatic increase for a little
Which
while.
is smart.
It may only be to like 100 or something.
Yeah, it's
but
something small.
It'll
fine.
refill.
In between
Right
the
up-
stages, Andy's Asteroids, we talked about it.
Yeah.
It's a little mini game. It's an auto scroller with a gas pedal where you're racing
a chicken apparently.
a chicken. Oh, pause. This game's absurd. I think you got that
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
now.
You're
but
a worm
like
in space.
it's Ren and Stimpy vibes. It's
Big time.
It's
like,
that mid 90s,
Yeah.
let's be random for
Nickelodeon.
random's sake kind of humor. Not annoyingly so, I don't think. I think it's actually really clever. To me, the humor here works. Sometimes we go back to these old 90s games and they're like weird, annoyingly edgy or whatever, and you're like, oh, it's the 90s but in the bad kind of way. This one feels like 90s but in the nostalgic kind of way for me, and so I don't know. It's funny and absurd, but in, I think, good ways.
And so, like, in between stages, you'll get like this little screen that where Earthworm Jim says "groovy" or something like that, and you've got little voice lines throughout the game. And so, like, when he's in Andy's asteroids and you're racing, you're avoiding rocks, you're gaining these speed orbs. Every time he grabs one, he says something. Kenny mentioned in his first play, I think he says "man" or something, but it sounds like he's cursing every time that you grab one, and it speeds him up. But it's just this quirky little mini game that is in between or at the end of every stage, where if you don't beat him in the race, you have to fight him. But
Yeah.
it's fairly easy, especially the first few times, to beat him in the race.
It's not Mode 7. It's the Genesis version of Mode 7. I forget the term, but it's kind
Mode
of like
8?
like yeah, Mode 8. It's like in Sonic, in the bonus stages where you've got like this 3D-esque like view. But I like them. They were welcome. I always like when platformers can throw in something that is mini game-ish or like a bonus stage that can be the same every time. I'm fine with that. I appreciate it here because going from stage to stage would be exhausting for a couple reasons. One of them being the game right out the gate shows you the frustration level that you're going to be dealing with. Kenny, not only with his controls, but the difficulty of this game is notable. A lot of people talk about it when referencing Earthworm Jim. Our community did this week. We did last time. And it made me laugh this week because it's kind of ridiculous. Right out the gate, first stage, the first jump you make, you get punished for it. There's a crow and there's a dog and there are spikes like right there. What kind of Dark Souls platformer is this? It's not like Mario where they're like, here's a block,
learning
get a
area.
mushroom.
Yeah.
Learn. This one's just like, you're dead, kill you. Like it really is a challenge, and you need to be in that mindset when you sit down for a sesh.
I'm fairly
And you also-
confident that on Kenny's first play, on that first section, that he dies between the dog biting you, the crow above, and the spikes. But I don't even blame him because
I know.
it does not hold your hand, but it does not get easier. Like,
No.
these stages are long. The first level takes forever. You finally think you're at the end when you get to a boss, but it's just the mini boss, and then
Yep.
you've got another boss.
The stages
Well,
are
and
long.
some of that could have been remedied with just some quality of life improvements. If they had let you shoot the gun while you were in the air
That'd be nice.
or like moving, game would have been significantly easier. You got to like have your feet on the ground to be
yeah,
shooting.
it's like
And
8
so
direction.
there's
standing
some
still.
very unique to the game kinds of things that take some getting used to. Again, some things that are just bad and some things that are just hard. But some of that you will kind of learn. There's sort of expectations and sort of ebb and flow of the game and how enemies are going to work. As you play, you are going to get better at that and kind of know what works and doesn't. But it's still going to punish you because, yeah.
Do you want to hear what we thought of the difficulty 7 years ago?
Yeah, I do actually.
I'm curious.
I'm probably gonna be like, it wasn't that hard.
Let's check it out.
I think that we are like babied with the games we have now. Like, for instance, one of the new Mario games. I think it's for like the 3DS or something. But like, if you die so many times, it will give you like this invincibility power up that you can just go like through enemies and jump farther and stuff like that and make it pretty much easy mode. So like, I think that has something to do with the difficulty we're feeling. Like, the game is really hard. I'm not taking away from that. Yeah, it's really hard. But I also think that for some games we are used to like being given
Absolutely.
the easy route.
Yeah, we don't have to earn it anymore. Like, I remember playing games back in the day and just grinding them out, just playing them again and again and again and again. And I think game design these days tries to avoid that, but I almost kind of miss it. I think that some of the appeal of a retro game is you feel like you earned it.
I agree, past Nolan. I mean,
I loved hearing little baby Nolan there.
I referenced that a lot, that Mario example, but I stand by that take because game difficulty is okay. You don't have to have a walk in the park. You do, though, need to follow convention when teaching players, especially in a platformer, and I do think that's where Earthworm Jim falls short. The difficulty can be fine, but ramp the player to it. Show the player more of what they're going to be doing in a less chaotic and dangerous environment. That's needed, and they didn't do that.
Yeah, see, I'm probably a little bit more nuanced in my view than I was here. I agree games shouldn't have so much hand-holding. You know, there's a little bit of the purist in me still. Though as I think with age get worse at games, I can appreciate people that are like, I'm going to play it on beginner. And I don't know that was the attitude I just was expressing in that clip. But I think there's a difference between hand-holding and not giving you a hand-hold. And this game just doesn't have hand-holds. Like, there should be ways to figure out how to get there, even if I have to earn it. But some of the frustration here is a level design that you're like,
yes,
I got to make a blind jump to some part of the map that there's no way to see it, and I got to just figure that out. Like, what? And so there's a difference there, and I think this one was poor on the extreme of how they implemented difficulty, but I also don't like that we swung the pendulum so far that we don't get some challenge in kind of, like modern day games, if you will. So I don't know. I kind of disagree with ourselves.
There's definitely some middle grounds, right? Like, I don't think that one or the other is the option, give you a star to fix everything or just throw you into the deep end. And maybe there's a time for both of those or a kind of game for both of those. But I do think the majority of these things need to be somewhere in the middle. But Kenny, you mentioned one of the two things that I think is the problem here. One is the stage design. And I think that from the length of the stage to the, what you're seeing and what is actually interactable. But I think the other big thing is a mechanical issue of and you can toss in a lot of things here, from hitboxes being wonky to we mentioned already, but not being able to use your gun in the air and just being able to control Jim. I played hours this week, and I played many hours in the last 7 years, and I never feel like I have full, complete control of my character, and that feels bad for a platformer.
It's very unconventional platforming. You're going right, but you're also going up and left, and that can work fine. I mean, the first thing that came to mind when I said that was that Home Improvement game that we played. They did it well. But this one, you can't tell what you're going to jump to. You can't tell what ledge is grabbable. You can't tell which zip line you're going to actually grab onto or fall into a pit that you don't know what's down there. Luckily, in the first stage, it's tires to help you not die immediately, but that goes away in later stages. And the stages get more confusing. There's more to be said here that I'll say for aged, but the way they laid out the platforming segments is more frustrating to me than dealing with the enemies.
I agree. And I think that there's some things that they were trying to do well. Like, this game tries to give you enough resources in health regeneration that you pick up, in guns to shoot guns, ammunition for your gun to shoot, in extra lives, and all of that. But so much of that is hidden in these little side areas or this little bonus content cache that you have to figure out a way to get into.
Require precise
if you're
jumps
playing,
or something.
Right, if you're not playing this game with that level of knowledge and have already figured that stuff out, you're gonna feel like you're struggling the whole time. And so I guess that sort of rewards exploration, but it also punishes you and kind of makes that stuff that should be bonusy feel mandatory. There were a lot of just things like that were quality of life stuff. I mean, we've said a bunch of them already, but can't jump while shooting, you don't have real good control of your float mechanic, your whip's not fast enough, you should be easier to land hooks, it should be harder to run out of ammunition. Like, there's just, like, the list is ongoing of ways that this game could just be a little less clunky or janky.
I do want to be clear, I rarely think a game is not you can't master a game. You can master any game. Just look at a speedrun of this game. Oh, yeah. You can get good. I don't have the energy to here. Well, it's like there's too much in the way.
What's interesting is that even with the mastery, I watched 2 different speedruns this last week. Garlisle shared them in our community, but one on the Super Nintendo, one on the Genesis. They're fairly comparable. But where there is a point, and this happens in other games too, but where both of the speedrunners got stuck, lost some lives. One lost all their lives, which was funny. It was at the... is it in Snot a Problem, that stage where you're bungee jumping against the mucus monster thing, which does make me think, like, one of the things that I do think it got right here, at least in concept, is the variety, because there are a few stages that are somewhat similar, the first couple, but like you get Andy's asteroids in between, you get one that is completely underwater, you get an escort mission with that dog companion.
Oh my god!
Where you're whipping it across, and they're frustrating, but there is some variety here, and you got to give it credit for that.
Absolutely, you do, and I'm glad we flipped that conversation, because we've said a lot of negative things about this game, but there's some really, really good things about it too. Not just in like humor and tone, and we've already talked about how fun that is, but also in that stuff, in the creativity. Bosses are kind of unique, and you got to like figure them out. They're not just straightforward. You're not just like shooting your way through, which is great. The levels are going to look and feel and play at least a little bit different mechanically. You listed a whole bunch, but there's also a level in the dark. There's so many things. To me, that sub level is the submersible level, is the example of how well they did this. Because like the countdown timer and having to find getting more oxygen. Supply. Yep, and then you for sure are going to hit the wall some, so you're going to start getting some chinks in that bubble that's holding you, and you don't know how many are going to last, and it's getting worse and worse visually, and they did such a good job of like making you feel, am I going to make it? Oh no, this is so close. And like just with the simple game mechanic, and it wasn't anywhere else. It was just tied in seamlessly. So I'm with you. The creativity here and the willingness to like try things and just have fun with the game was really, really well done.
The Bungie the Bungie stage is one of the best like sub stages like ever.
Oh, it's great.
It's so unique and creative and funny and fits tone and functions properly. And I really enjoyed that one the most. So yeah, they went out of their way to get creative here, and I don't want to take that away from them. So
Dustin, you shook your head. It's not your favorite?
No, that one was frustrating to me because not only do you can the snot monster tear your rope, but there's like an alligator at the bottom that can bite you in half. It was frustrating.
That's like classic cartoon.
Kenny's got a joke.
So it's not one you would recommend to people.
There we go.
That's all.
Snot.
I couldn't help it.
Aged.
Can we talk humor first?
Of course.
I think often when we talk this mid-90s humor, we talk about it not aging well. And I don't know if it's just because I'm from the era and it worked for me then that it still works for me now. But for me personally, this isn't a negative aging component, although I feel like it could be for some because it is super, super irreverent. It is super silly, but I don't think it's unintelligent. Like I think we just talked about Bungie fighting a snot monster, so like that's unintelligent to some degree.
But a 30-year-old man came up with that idea.
Right, yeah, full grown. But also a 30-year-old man in the 90s, which was going with, I mentioned Ren and Stimpy earlier. There's some shows that had, a lot of shows that had this kind of humor.
Sure.
And it worked for me then, and it still works for me now.
Yeah.
Agreed. It works for me now too. I mean, I kind of said that before, but I'm gonna reiterate it. Sometimes the '90s stuff doesn't,
Right.
but especially when those things are like pop culture references or like derogatory humor, or like was it Gex or something? There was some
Gex.
game we played that you guys thought was so funny, and I just kind of was over it and couldn't laugh.
It was
that
too
much.
referential to like people.
Right. It just like it was funny then, but it's not funny now in my mind. And this is not that. It's so neutral and it's slapstick, and it like the jokes explain themselves. And so yeah, even though it's a little dated in its humor, I think it completely holds up and is honestly where this game shines. Like, it's so funny,
but still super funny because like, and this is not a spoiler, get over it, this game is so old at this point, and this is our second episode at least on it, but like at the beginning of the game you launch that cow into outer space.
Yeah, it doesn't come back.
Well, it does. You see it fly through the screen. This is fun because I think I told Kenny about it, or maybe I told Nolan about it in the first episode, but
I forget.
The cow in a few screens, you'll have to really pay attention, but like flies by very quickly throughout the game. But then at the very end, when you've saved Princess What's-Her-Name and you're about to kiss her, the cow falls down on her and crushes her.
Best.
The cow that you launch from the very first moment in the game
just like ruins it at the very end.
That's hilarious.
The humor absolutely works for me. I rarely will be served a 90s game that has this type of humor and reject it. And maybe it's because we're from that era, maybe. But it's also not cringe. I feel like when we look back at some of the games that are coming out right now, like that try to either be funny or like woke or intelligent or something, we'll just be like this is there's no substance, there's no charm here. This has like charm all throughout it and so much creativity that like you can't help but laugh. So I love it here. I love it in like shows like Ren and Stimpy, like you mentioned, but I also loved it in Toe Jam and Earl. It's ludicrous, it's out there, and it stands the test of time to me.
And that humor isn't served up in a vacuum. It serves it up on a really nice looking platter.
Yeah.
Because this game, we talked about the creativity, but not just in the gameplay and the humor, but in the look of the levels, the visuals of what you've got going on, the animations of your character, and all the little like nuance of different things that it can do. The first time you realize the worm can go outside of the suit and still jump around, and then the suit is kind of still moving, and then you gotta like get back into it. So funny, but like well put together too. And this game looks great.
Yeah, like back to the humor thing and the animation merging. You hold up while you're like hanging on something, and he grabs his own butt and yoinks it up. Come on. And the art and the animations are insane, actually. The year.
Art direction is one of the most memorable features of Earthworm Jim.
I think iconic.
They were so smart. So the history here is that Sega's Sonic was the concept. What was the idea that sparked? Hey, let's come up with an idea of our own, a character of our own, a mascot of our own. And we have played a lot of games and know that mascots tend to fail if you're not a plumber or a blue furred hedgehog. But this is one that was so different enough and had so much unique style and personality in presentation that really does set it apart and causes it to stand the test of time.
Absolutely. Like, so much so that with the other examples you named, the games are fantastic. They feel great. And you've heard me at least be kind of negative about this one, and yet Earthworm Jim, the character, is still like notable, loved, looks great, is iconic, and like, so that's how successful they were in the art direction. I want to mention the artists because we have to. Doug Tennappel and Nick Broody and a few other people just crushed it.
Yeah. So yes, not only were 4 games released in this series: Earthworm Jim 2, Earthworm Jim 3D, Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy, but it was an animated show for a little bit, which I think it probably is where it thrives. There was also a small comic release by Marvel
No way.
In fact, this week I read all 3 of the issues.
Hey, are they good?
Hey, fun.
Oh yeah, it
That's
pretty
great.
much follows but builds out the story that takes place in the game. And yeah, it's good. The artwork is just like the game, but the humor is there too. It's really good.
You almost had to do a cartoon after, and it's crazy that the game existed first, right? Before all of these pieces,
right.
because you could almost go backwards and see like, oh, this cartoon existed first. But that's how good the game art is, that it feels cartoonish several times throughout your playthrough. You're like, what in the world? This is straight up a cartoon episode, and I love it.
The music I thought was great. It fits for everything that's going on. Again, it's not going to be something that I listen to after the fact, but it definitely works in the Earthworm Jim world.
It fits the game. It's got that kind of wonky feel enough that it's not like put it on the back while you're reading a book kind of music or anything, and it's very like context specific, but very well done. I will point out once again that I think the Genesis version of music sounds better than the Super Nintendo version. So if you care about that, you may want to go that direction. But it works and sounds good and fits on both.
I just think that the sound effects are a bit much. Like the yelling kind of got to me.
Yeah, there's a lot, man.
It's spammy. There's, it is cartoony as well, and so you get a lot of like boing, like those kinds of things going on. So, but the music itself, I was vibing to.
There is a remake that released in 2010, so it was even around when the show started, and it's called Earthworm Jim HD, that actually was released with difficulty modes. And I believe the hardest difficulty mode, the one above hard, is called Original. So it was the original difficulty of the game, which
I like that
they know was way too hard.
They know.
That's so funny.
It also gives some quality of life things, like it fixes some of the mechanics. I don't know if you can shoot in the air, but you're given if you press select when a boss starts, it gives you a pop-up hint of how to beat the boss, which is super nice since they all operate differently.
Yeah.
And even the first stage that could take you 30 minutes to play through in a first play is split into 2 different levels. So like they really
makes so much more sense.
Thought through some things here.
Yeah.
If you want a copy of Earthworm Jim, I'm going to tell you Genesis first, and then I'll tell you Super Nintendo, since they came out at the same time, everybody.
Yeah, but it's a Genesis game.
Shut up. It is $21 used and loose, or $225 new for the Genesis.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
If you want it for your Super Nintendo, it is $33 used and $3,709 new.
But why? Don't say it's the better version.
I don't know that. You know what? They don't list the reasons why here. That's just how much they're selling for.
They need to start listing reasons why. They need to justify that listing.
Isn't that absurd?
That
in fact,
absurd.
That is absurd.
Oh my goodness. One was just sold brand new, I guess, in August of last year for $5,655.
Them SNES collectors, man. Tripping.
Factory sealed brand new. Oh my goodness. Guys, last year someone spent nearly $6,000 on an Earthworm Jim game.
Last year. That's so recent. Just buy Genesis, folks. Save some money.
Final thoughts.
At the end of each and every one of our episodes, we determine whether or not the game gets our vote for New Game Plus status, which is our general thumbs up or thumbs down. Does require 2/3 of the vote to swing one way or the other. But this is not what we did on episode 1, when we didn't know what in the world we were doing.
We clearly talked out what we'd be doing before, and it was structured.
Well, here's what we did.
On a scale of whatever you want, what would you rate it, Kenny?
Oh gosh, I didn't know this was coming.
A skill of anything I would want, I would rate it.
Anything.
Okay. I'd rate it like a solid, like maybe.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to expand on that, or you just want to leave it at that?
No. Maybe they knew what they were doing. Maybe they did. Maybe you want to play this game, maybe you don't.
That's a really
Maybe I beat the first level, maybe I didn't.
All right, beautiful.
Maybe.
But definitely didn't.
Nolan, completely different scale. What do you rate it?
A way better one, because mine was terrible.
Why don't I just use numbers instead of being weird?
You can use a number.
Yeah, it's your scale.
Okay. 7.
I'm assuming that was a scale from 3 to 30.
What 1 to 100?
Just
3
say
3 to 30.
3 to 30. I rated it.
Yeah. You wanna expand on that any, or you just?
No.
Yeah. Okay. And see, I would just give it a solid flying cow.
Okay.
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 We were really good podcasters. First of all,
Dustin
We
kept
have-
trying to get more out of us by being like, "Do you want to expand?"
No.
on that? And both of us were like, "No."
Nah. We
Just,
stand by our opinion.
Dustin
is-
was hating us.
I mean, just really good for podcasting purposes.
That still happens today, though.
Yeah, let's go in the same order, which is Kenny, Nolan, Dustin. But this time, instead of doing it on whatever scale you want, which was a
3 to
terrible
30?
idea. By the way, just to clarify, Kenny, last time you gave it a maybe, Nolan, you gave it a 7, and I gave it a flying cow. This time, we're actually going to give it, for the first time ever,
Yeah.
New Game Plus status or not. Kenny, what's your vote? And do you want to
so
expand on it?
I do. I'm going to pre-expand on it like we
Yes!
do.
Oh, no.
Because we're professionals these days. So I clearly have a real hate love thing going on here. Anyone thinking about playing this game needs to know it's hard, it's gimmicky, it's a little bit janky at times. It's also creative, expressive, and obviously crafted with love. In the end, for me, this week at least, love won. I'm not saying I love this game, but the love that went into making it, which expresses itself in unique bosses, great music, amazing visuals, and very out-of-the-box gameplay, for better and often for worse, eventually won me over. That's after I figured out that I could even play the game successfully at all and got over myself and kind of got not good, but decent. So this is a very begrudging NGP from me. I like this game. I don't like playing the game. I may still have nightmares, but it's classic and it's Earthworm Jim. And it was a well-made, flawed game. People ought to check it out, though. New Game Plus.
Kenny, there was big discussion this week in Discord about how interesting of a person you are when it comes to giving your vote for New Game Plus status.
Yeah,
because
I saw it.
inevitably, without fail, it is either you hate the game and you give it New Game Plus, or you love the game but no New Game Plus.
I saw that combo. and I
I'm
was
just
like,
adding
so true.
drama to my opinion, but I'm also just a very conflicted person.
We are well aware.
Nuanced.
Nolan,
Onion.
last
Yeah.
year you gave it a 7. Nope, last year, 7 years ago, you gave it a 7. This year, do you give it your New Game Plus status?
I gave it a 7 on a scale from 3 to 30.
Correct.
All right, I'm ready to make my statement on this game and be done with it so we don't have to revisit it again. This is a classic case of style over substance. The foreground is crafted so well, and the artist deserves praise and recognition. It is very iconic, very memorable, and my favorite aspect of the game is the tone and the art style and just the overall 90s-ness of it. It's so impressive. It's one of the best on the console visually. However, I find the game quite unplayable. I mean, the frequent dead ends, the precision needed to defend yourself, the overall jankiness in controlling Jim, it just falls flat for me as a platformer because that's what it is, and that's what it's supposed to be. I gotta finally seal the coffin here and say I do not give this game New Game Plus.
Wow. So on our first episode / 364th episode, it comes down to one final
it.
vote, which is tough because, man, do I ever find myself in the middle.
This is it.
What this game does have is incredibly unique, quirky charm. From lassoing his own head to the groovy sound effect to the variety of of game that you're playing and interacting with, it has got so much unique charm. And I think Earthworm Jim did what other mascot games could not do and had a character that was unique enough to rise above. Not rise above Sonic and Mario and Link for that, but to rise above all of the other trash. Yeah, Arrow and the Pizza Boy and Leonoid and others.
Yeah.
But where it falls apart is at the gameplay. And they had such good ideas and such frustrating implementation that I hated playing this game this week. Like, that's why I went to the comics and enjoyed the comic reading. And on a show, I didn't watch the show this week because it's hard to find, but on a show, I bet this is where Earthworm Jim thrives. That wouldn't have existed without the game because they started it there, which is unheard of. But I think Earthworm Jim as a character and as a franchise gets a thumbs up from me. But from this game, it does not. Meaning our very first game revisited, which we were so smart to start with a game that isn't good. Anyways, here. In 2023, 7.5 years after the genesis of our show, Earthworm Jim is not New Game Plus certified.
That's going to corner us. A lot of people are going to write us off now.
But a lot of people won't.
A lot of people won't.
We'll see, because according to our YouTube poll this week, 79% said yes, it's worth playing today.
Yeah, we have no listeners after this.
And only 7% said no.
I said no on it. I said no. That wasn't me.
And 15% have never played it. So, guys, that is an overwhelming amount of yeses.
But did they play it this week? Or are they remembering?
They're remembering. They are remembering.
Oh man, we're canceled.
Speaking of remembering, I grabbed a comment before deleting. I grabbed a comment of our very first track.
Like on SoundCloud or something?
On SoundCloud from our very first track, a guy named Bill commented on it.
Bill.
First commentary? Holy.
And he said, great game to start off. I had forgotten how hard some of these levels were. I played it as a kid on my Genesis, and I remembered it being awesome. The show was fantastic as well. You should look up some clips from it. It's so 90s.
Bill is so real for leaving that comment on a SoundCloud bite of a terrible podcast. Like, so real. That is so nice.
Yeah, it's so
Most
good.
people would listen to that, move on.
And just to shout out, because, well, let me actually hold that. Let me move on to a few of our listener commentary nowadays. When we first played it 7 years ago, we played it by ourselves in a vacuum.
We didn't have people listening.
No commentary.
Yeah.
Now there's so much that we're not going to be able to read them all. But here's a few of them. Dan, our editor and producer, said, Earthworm Jim occupies a bizarre corner of my childhood nostalgia, and I have fond memories of the first two games along with the TV show. Somehow I managed to finish this one on difficult back in the day, but 25 years later, I have no evidence whatsoever to support the claim. The difficulty isn't totally unapproachable, but it can spike to the point of unfairness in several places with some unquestionable enemy placements, and the pod race stage is another common point of frustration. The variety of artwork, music, and humor are easily the biggest selling points here. I do still enjoy the gameplay, but maybe not quite as much as I used to as a kid. It's still a personal NGP for me, but I'd probably suggest that most people who appreciate Jim's brand of humor would be better off tracking down the cartoon to watch instead.
Look, there's a trend. Bill said the same thing early. We gotta find it. We gotta find it, community watch it.
Yeah.
We're all saying the same thing, just coming to slightly different conclusions. Like, Earthworm Jim is great. This game is hard and imperfect.
Yeah. I will say that Dan said it still gets personal NGP for him. And then we go to Jesse the Jet, which this is what I wanted to bring up. I hate to miss people here, but probably within the first 2 to 3 weeks of our podcast, when we sounded as bad as we did and had as bad opinions as we did and had silence that stretched for 30 minutes sometimes, even after editing for some reason.
That sounded like this.
Bill, Antonin, and Jesse were some of those day ones that showed up early on. And so I love that Jesse played along this week, wrote in. Jesse says, as a kid, I was pretty fascinated by Earthworm Jim. I had an issue of GamePro or Game Players that had a lot of preview coverage, which really gripped me. They'd created so much concept art, and the animation in the game is very detailed. And I watched, the cartoon a lot. But the most I'd played Earthworm Jim is the first level on a demo disc that came with my family's first home PC. I've listened to this podcast since the second or third week and remember thinking, I would have played along for Earthworm Jim. I've always wanted to play that. Now that the time has come for me to actually play it, I'm so disappointed. While it is still as visually charming and the right kind of quirky weird as I thought it probably was back in the 90s, it's super not fun to play. Even though this is the only level of the game I've played before, I'm struggling to progress and frankly enjoy the first level. I'm so sad that I can't give this one a GP. 90s Jessica would be so disappointed in 2023 Jessica.
Sometimes we play stuff that nostalgia makes us think is good, and then you like there's a popular one in my mind that I keep referencing that I don't want to because people will be pissed, but there's a game that we played that I'm like
I love the conflict here. Like, it's you hear it in everybody because people love this franchise, but not the game.
So maybe unintentionally it was the perfect first game to pick because of
it really was.
Like,
it was good. It was low-key a good pick.
So Dan said yes. Jesse said sadly no. And Harold...
Sadly?
I mean, why wouldn't sadly be a word?
That was an
That's
episode
perfect.
1 word, Dustin.
Harold said, I really like the graphics of Earthworm Jim. They are very colorful, nicely animated, and all just fit. Sometimes the tile sets blend with the backgrounds, which can be annoying, but I got over it pretty quickly. The music also charmed me, and it fit every stage. The tracks are pretty long as well for a game of this era, which made them very loopable without being repetitive. All in all, very groovy. Gameplay was a bit off, though. Collision boxes were not always clear, and some actions only worked when the previous animation had ended, making it feel a bit clunky. Because of this, I missed a lot of jumps and swings. The humor and overall quirkiness really amused me, from the soundtrack in hell, hey, it's heck, to the idle animations to the ending scene, just madness. It is a far from perfect game, but I'm really glad I tried it.
I'm starting to think, were the developers not making a platformer first? I mean, it's a platformer, but did they have something else in mind here that we're missing and sound ignorant about? Because it's not your normal platforming experience.
Yeah.
There were examples, Castlevania, all of them. Just make that, and it's a good platformer, but they made something else.
Yeah, they obviously had platforming in the back of their mind, but they were wanting to do something different, and they did. They succeeded.
Dude, I want that team from the 90s to be transported to a certain point in time in the future when they could have made Earthworm Jim a 3D platformer. Do you know how good that game would be on GameCube or something? Or PlayStation? I could see it being fantastic.
I don't want it on N64. That would be...
Oh, come on.
All right.
Little polygon worm.
Finally, Super Gamer Guy said Earthworm Jim is one of the most creative games of the 16-bit era and not afraid to try out all sorts of neat, wacky ideas. Too bad they aren't executed well. Level gimmicks are janky, unintuitive, and often a hindrance to normal gameplay. That gameplay itself is floaty, with inaccurate attacks and poor hit detection. The level design leaves a lot to be desired as well, sporting predatory enemy and hazard placement that sets the player up for consistent failure. In spite of its charming art design and solid soundtrack, this game laughs in the face of all who play it, mocking interested players with every aspect of its creation. Jim would be better off staying underground where he belongs, 6 feet under to be exact.
Whoa!
No NGP.
Whoa! Use him for fish bait? So the 70 whatever percent really are misremembering, and they're soft gamers that if they return to now, they would be like, nah, I'm softened.
It is something that I think a lot of people, including myself originally, and probably 7 years from now, we'll have forgotten. And we'll say, why did we not give this game New Game Plus? And we'll come back to it. But
I guess.
because everybody has this feeling of like there's so much good here, and
I
think
love the game.
I think that can overshadow the gameplay.
Yeah.
Some of that. Anyways, it is time to put aside Earthworm Jim once and for all.
Oh man, that's kind of sad.
And to move on to a new game. But before we do, because we're going to the Retro Master List, at least to some degree, do you want to hear the origins of the Retro Master List?
Yeah, because I legit don't know.
Let's do it.
Before we do, how many games do you think we had on the list when we recorded episode 1? We did have a few.
Like 10.
Okay.
I'm gonna say 11.
Oh, nice. Well, let's find out.
So at the end of every week's podcast, we are going to randomly select from a list of games that we've compiled of retro games 15 years or older, and we've started the list. We've got about 6-7 games on here that are older than 15 years old that we've just kind of thrown into, and yeah.
For those guys listening, it's a pretty mediocre list. We literally just have suggested things that we either remember playing or that someone has mentioned, and the rule is just that old and a game.
Right.
Like, I put a PC game that I fondly remember from my childhood on the list that we definitely need to do at some point. There's console games. It's wide open, but our list is really, really, really lacking.
Really lacking. And so this is where you can help most. We've got an email for the podcast. You can email ngppodcast@gmail.com. ngppodcast@gmail.com. That just stands for New Game Plus Podcast, NGP Podcast. And you can send us some suggestions of games that you'd want us to include on the list. And really, if it's older than 15 years old and has some kind of story elements to it, so it's not a fighter, not just a straight up puzzle game, then we'll include
anything worthwhile.
Yeah.
I mean, if something's notable, yeah.
So for example, Snake might not be that interesting of a game.
Well, speak for yourself.
I could spend half an hour just talking about memories of Snake as a child, like the DOS version.
Well,
That's true.
Tune in for next week's podcast as Kenny talks about Snake.
I won't be here.
Dustin was trying to get only RPGs.
All right.
He was so hard trying to not get games that he didn't want to play.
It was like no puzzlers,
right.
no platform. Like, I hate those games. Just put RPGs and story games.
Yeah, I was like, hey, don't send us any garbage. We only want to play like really good classic games.
I love it. That's Dustin's early vision for the show. Is just like a Final Fantasy show.
A lot of people are listening now. If you would have been able to get on your game on the Retro Master List back then, the odds of your game being selected would have been much higher than now.
We're so good. Yeah,
You'd
we
be
went
running
from
the show.
6 or 7 to thousands of games that people have suggested over time, which thank you all for that.
Absolutely.
And for being
I think it did
such
jump
an
quickly,
awesome part
too.
of our community.
Someone went in and just went boom and added like every game.
Yeah, which is not ideal because now we get really, really mediocre games. But so we should have stuck to my idea in the beginning.
Maybe
honestly.
we're onto something.
So we are going to our Retro Master List, but not in the normal way. We're not going to randomly select because next week's episode is a director's episode.
Woot!
Which we're super excited about.
Let's go.
We're going to be having Compacta join us on the show, and the game that Compacta hand selected from our Retro Master List is a not so retro game from 2007.
This keeps happening. Okay.
Okay.
It does. Directors keep bringing about, and that's fine, games that they're connected to that they played, when they were younger often.
Yeah.
That's not the case here, actually. Compacta came to us and said, I've got 3 different options that I want to present to you. And they presented us 3 different options of games or ways to select the game. One of them was like, we could handpick a game because we've never been able to do that before. We felt like it was against the spirit of the show. They suggested another game, and then they suggested this game that they actually hadn't played before, but they have it, know that it has some great history, and knew that it would be a great topic of conversation. It did come out in 2007. It's a first-person shooter. But hold on. That came out for the PC and Xbox 360.
Call of Duty.
Developed and published by 2K Games. Nolan.
Oh, wait.
Produced or directed, excuse me, by Ken Levine.
Oh!
Wow.
Oh,
The
baby.
game was not retro when we started this show.
No,
but now
absolutely
it
not.
is. We, for the first time on the podcast, are going to be playing a game that Kenny has never played before called BioShock.
Kenny, you've never played it?
No. We could rename this game Catch Me Up on games that I've missed because I've been playing other old stuff.
We could name this game that or this podcast that. Kenny.
Or the podcast or
Nolan,
a t-shirt. You just
Kenny-
name things whatever you want them to.
Kenny is going to be terrified. I just thought of this.
Yeah.
Is this a scary game?
Wait, can he do the first play?
No, I don't want to. Last time we
Guys.
played a scary game, it gave me the hiccups.
That was not a scary game.
I need more
It was
guns. What'd you say?
terrifying.
Yo.
No.
Wait, in 2015, I would have never thought we'd be
Right.
playing BioShock on this podcast.
Absolutely not.
Literally, no way. Wow.
Okay.
So we've
Wow.
had Mass Effect, BioShock. Like,
Right.
We're just playing
in a
all
row.
new games.
We're hitting all the big ones. Okay. So find a copy of BioShock. It will be very easy to do. Play it along
There's a
with us
remaster.
this week and be terrified like Kenny is bound to be. This is going to be good.
I'm so afraid.
Before you journey to Rapture, journey to Discord. You can join our community. We've talked a lot about some of the folks that were there in the early days, but it's never too late. Our community's thriving, and it's free to join. Go to discord.gg/newgameplus.
There's some people that aren't afraid to support us on patreon.com. We appreciate each and every one of you who don't just listen with your ears, but also give us your vote of confidence by being patrons of the show. So big thank you to our newest patron joining us for the first time, and maybe is what Nolan's showing us right now, Slug Baby. Thanks so much. Welcome to the show. We also want to say a big thank you to our director level supporters, Bro Jim, DH Bowser, Garlisle, George, Super Hypered. Thank you to our producers, including Adam, Alex, Marley, Antonin, Ben, Brunt, Ellis, Francesca, Gimbin, J. Robert, Jared, Joey, Jordan, Justin, Clint, Knickknack, Corey, Lawai, Maxima, Mr. Lattes,
Wow.
Pipari, Sajin, Shauna, Subsonic Demon, Tazelhoff, Thomas, Unbelievable, and Zion. You guys are heartbeat of the show, and we appreciate you so much.
Boom, boom.
You can find us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube. Those links are in the show notes. Listen directly on any podcast provider of your choice. Make sure you subscribe so that you are the first to get new NGP episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a kind rating and review. Our video episode was edited and produced by our friend Nolan this week. Our audio episode was edited and produced by our friend Dan Willett. And before we sign off of this Redux, let's listen to how we signed off of our first episode.
Oh,
No.
This is going to be so uncomfortable.
All right. Anything else y'all want to say before we leave?
No, yes, we promise this will get better. We're kind of new at it, and
We can't
Yep.
promise that.
Speak for yourself. I'm gonna get worse.
We can't promise that, Kenny. You're
okay,
gonna
we
start throwing in puns, and everything's gonna go downhill, and we'll quit.
we promise that we'll have more fun at least. Even
Yeah.
I
And
got nothing.
audio quality will be better too. Just send your donations to ngppodcast
Why are
at
you hating on
gmail.com.
me?
No, we're fine. All right. Well, thank y'all for listening, and tune in next week for as we meet together and talk about Half-Life.
And
you.
to all you Earthworm Jim fans out there, if you're angry that we didn't love your game and we're bad at it, please don't send us hate mail.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
100% on brand.
No, it's
Dustin
not.
trying to monetize. Me
No, Kenny.
trying to
Hold the show together? Yeah,
stay,
right.
stay positive and
No, Kenny, it's actually
and
it
Nolan
shocked me
being
listening
negative?
to it. It shocked
Yeah.
me listening to it because Dustin was like, anything else y'all want to say? And Kenny goes, yeah, actually. And then goes on to this thing. That doesn't happen.
I don't soapbox. I certainly still soapbox. And you knew there were puns coming and warned everyone, and they're still sticking around.
I'm glad you've
So,
settled down on them, though.
Barely. That's not what's happened.
At least this show did not become worm food and is still alive today. Earthworms. Join us next week as we play BioShock. Until then, I'm still Queen Slug for a butt.
I'm still bad at these games.
I'm still King Slug for a butt.
Ooh, baby. And this has been New Game Plus.